Hi everyone. Um, we're gonna look into a soldering kit today, and that is our retro game soldering kit. And this is just like another practice kit, but this is a functional practice kit. So that means that once we put everything together, we're gonna see something happen. Something work. I'm just gonna disassemble these things here and keep them on the table. These are some of the tools I'll be using on my right hand side here, and soldering on my left hand side. This particular kit comes with a manual. There are a bunch of links that we're gonna give you guys that are gonna have kits and all, some with manuals, some without manuals. You guys can then figure out which ones you want to go with. And yeah, let's start. Let's begin this one. Just gonna lay out everything on here. This one looks fairly straightforward, I think. I think. Doesn't have many different components. You can see there's some display here. There's the main IC that runs the whole thing. This is a seat for the IC. So we'll essentially be soldering this, and then the IC sits inside the seat. Then you have this display. I think it's like a 2-in-1 display, or no, they're two separate displays, but they act like one big display. I think goes there. I don't know. We're gonna figure it out. All right. So these are the electronic components. I'm gonna keep them on one side, and then we keep the mechanical components on the other side. We have the buttons, electronics, the switch, buzzer, switch button. That's our USB port button. There we go. Let's keep this on the side. So mechanical parts, we'll probably put it together in a later step. These are again all mechanical, which includes screws and standoffs. So we'll deal with them in a bit. Let's start off with the board. Let's look at what the manual says we should be doing. So it says start off with soldering the USB port, which is right over here. And then we can see that only the positive and negative terminals are tinned. That means only those are the ones that are going to form connections and the ones we're actually going to use, not the rest. Also, which side's up and which side's down is important. So let's find that out. Is it like this? Or is it like this? See one picture showing that. I think everything just goes on to one side, and that is this side. So we have the printed face is where we are going to put all of our components. Okay, let's begin. So holding this here, I'm gonna plug this in there. I'm gonna flip it around. Make sure my soldering iron's hot and clean. The board side. Also do this the other way around. I'm keeping this a bit higher because the legs stick out the bottom side. So most of these soldering wires come with flux, which is this stuff, already inside the core. So if you are soldering big components, not like tiny legs, you don't need to worry that much about rosin. You could just solder, and the flux from within the core is going to be sufficient and keeping a clean solder, and also not just clean but also oxidation free, and it also keeps the contacts from sticking with each other. But what you have to make sure is that you deposit the wire onto your contact and not onto your iron first, because if you do it on your iron, the rosin vaporizes, the flux vaporizes, and then there's nothing left to form the bond here. So you want to melt the wire on the point where you want it to form a bond. So we're going to form one bond here, and then we're going to flip the board around. This is just to hold it in place. Now that that's done, you can flip the board around. Let's zoom in a little bit. And then these are the other two connections that we need. That's one. That's the other one. So that's positive and negative. All right, we got our first component on there. So I just took a small break to have a look at everything and make sure that we aren't missing any parts, and I haven't missed out any instructions or So it's fairly straightforward. I thought this was going to be a bit more complex, but it's just a few components. I can line them up. So what we want to do is that we want to line the bump on the IC holder with the bump on the board here. So this is the equivalent of the dot that we talked about in our last tutorial, where we talked about a small dot being at the corner. So in these ICs, there's a small notch here. You can show that in the video. You can see that there's a small notch indent, and that indent needs to line up with the indent on the IC holder and then the indent on the board itself. So let's do that. I'm going to quickly just put in all the components and start soldering. So we have this. We've got the switch here. We have the buttons, and I believe there's one button that goes there. There's one button that goes here. There are 4 buttons that go 1, 2, 3, 4. That one's bent. Okay. We have our 8-segment display. Yeah. And then our capacitor goes in there. So capacitors have 2 legs, and in this one polarity matters, which means which leg goes into which connection matters because one's positive and one's negative. You can't reverse this. So to find out which one's positive and negative, you can see there's a line, there's a strip. The white strip indicates negative, the negative contact. And on the positive side, there's nothing. The other way you can find out is one leg's longer than the other. So you know the longer one's positive, the shorter one's negative. So there are two ways of finding out. And on the board, it says positive and negative, so you can line these up and push them into the right hole. We have these two displays. I think each of them goes there. All right, let's solder these first. The buzzer also has the positive printed on it, and that goes there. I don't think we can flip this board and solder everything in one go. So I'm just gonna slightly bend some of the pins so that they remain that way. Okay, so I've bent some of the pins on these boards just so that when I flip the board, the components don't fall off. And now let's get into soldering them. This is gonna be, because the pins are so big and so far from each other, we don't need to use a lot of flux. We can rely on the flux that is inside the wire itself. So let's quickly just get through this. So as you can see, I'm not, what I'm doing is I'm depositing solder at the component on the part where it needs to form the connection, not onto the iron. These two wires are annoying, so I'm going to snip it off. For snipping them off, I'm going to use my snipping tool. All right, where were we? We're at the buttons. There you go. Let's do the 8-segment display next. Oops. All right. That looks like it's done. Let's do the rest of the buttons. And then the last thing we're going to do is the IC holder, because that has many pins. I want to make sure it's pressed against the board. What you want to make sure when you're soldering is also that you're not staying on the board for too long, because if you do, these copper traces can peel off if you heat them for too long. So, I mean, with practice, you're gonna find the sweet spot of how long you have to stay on the contact to keep it hot enough so it soaks up the solder, but not too hot to peel off the copper trace. Okay, let's flip it around. Push the socket in, and while it's in, I want to make one or two contacts. And this is gonna be a bit tricky because I can't feed it with my hand, so I have to. There we go. So what I did was I left the wire hanging in there, and then I brought my board close to it like so. Sorry, it's out of focus. And just made a quick connection there. And once that's done, the rest is, you can just run through all of them, the rest of it. Okay, all right, I believe so last component would be these two panels. They have this protective tape on them that I'm peeling off. So what we want to find out is if this thing has any polarity. So turns out that this text needs to be facing down. So I think that's the indication that that's the negative side. So we're gonna push this downwards, and again, same way, I'm going to leave some wire up here, like so, and just make a brief connection on two ends, and we're set. Let's do the same for the second block, notch facing down. If the pins are not aligned, you can just bend them slightly. Make sure they're aligned. So I'm gonna try showing you guys how I do this. I'm pushing it with one hand, and with the other I'm gonna feed. So there's one there, and I'm gonna do the same in this other corner. There we go. And you can keep the board down. Okay, I think we're done. Oops, I think I missed this connection here. There we go. Okay, time to put the microcontroller inside this. Again, let's remember to make sure the notch goes into the notch. The pins are not going in because they're fanned outwards like so. So we gotta push them in a bit. One way of doing that would be, you don't want to bend them individually, you want to bend them all as a group. So just, yeah, that looks about right. Let's see if it fits. Oh, we gotta bend a bit more. Okay. Let's see. There we go. So let's make sure all the pins are in there. It's nicely locked in. And it's ready. Let's see if it works. So I have my 12-volt supply here. I'm gonna connect it to this. This is included in everyone's kit. Should be. just a 5-volt output. There we go. Oops. Okay, moment of truth. Does this work or not? It works. It's Tetris. Nice. Yay. Nice. Okay, that's all. See you guys.